Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Carmen Vitali here with you guys. A day early, switching it up. Now going on a Wednesday to preview every single game that we've got upcoming in week 9 in the NFL. I'm very, very excited about this one. We've had a lot of shakeup, it feels like, over the last couple of days. We got a franchise quarterback bench. We got players on the move at the trade deadline. We got a lot to analyze. Jameis is back in action, absolutely flamethrowing it up. We got a lot of things to talk about beyond those games as well. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Carmen Vitali. As I said, PFF Plus subscription. If you guys don't have one, we're talking about a lot of statistics here on this show. You can get one. You can follow along. That's the best way to do that. Shout out to everybody who's joining us live. We appreciate you getting in on the show. Carmen, how are you doing today?
Great. I tried my best for like a Halloween vibe because that's tomorrow and I love Halloween.
I don't know if I'm gonna get canceled for this.
Oh no.
I don't like Halloween. It's overrated. It's overrated. The whole holiday is overrated. The whole spectacle, it's completely overrated. It's just I'm not I'm not fun. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. You're just not fun or clever.
That one's probably correct because when I was a kid, I did dress up as a hockey player like 3 years in a row just because I wanted to rollerblade around the neighborhood and get to all the houses faster to get the candy.
See, that's fun. And like you're very ingenious for doing that kind of stuff. That's good ingenuity there for 12-year-old Trev.
It's true. It's true. And I feel like I could have given myself more credit, but I feel like I just dressed up as the same Halloween player or the hockey player every single Halloween. Maybe if I had a different jersey, I could give myself a little bit of credit, but I can't even tell you the last time I went out for Halloween. I really
It's
can't.
so much fun and it allows you to like do something funny, clever. Like I mean, I pretty much always have like 3 different costume ideas every year. But I always try to make them like not cookie cutter. Even when I was in college, when like all the girls were dressing a certain way and like I went to Arizona State, so like the most common costume was like Eve and it was like 2 leaves and whatever. I would never do that. I would try to do something. It would still be cute, but it would be funny. So like, for instance, this year, I went to a Halloween party on Saturday and I dressed up as Sandra Bullock in Miss Congeniality. So I had like the red or the pink sequin gown and I made a sash that said federal agent and I wore combat boots and I had aviators. So like the dress was really cute. Everything was really cute, but it's also really funny. Because it's miscongeniality.
That's true. That's true. Look, maybe you're just better at it than I am. I don't know.
I mean,
I
obviously.
think the last Halloween costume, okay, whoa. Easy. We didn't have to throw that one in there. I think the last costume that I had for Halloween, I was like full Peaky Blinders. Like I had the whole outfit and everything. And my mom's
that would suit you so well.
and I think like that, but that was like 5 years ago. And I feel like that was my peak. Like I'm good. Like I can't top it. That's that's the favorite costume I've ever had. That was my Halloween retirement. I feel like that was the best it's ever going to get. So I haven't tried since. I'll let that be an excuse for my place.
If I can top my easy bake oven costume from 7th grade, you can top Peaky Blinders.
I've got PFF employees in the chat roasting me right now for my take. So I just want you to know that they are on your side. I got to know for people who are watching the show, is Halloween overrated or not? I think it's kind of overrated, but maybe I'm just a hater. So I need to hear from people who are watching the show. Let's dig into these games though. That's what people are here for, not to hear my bad Halloween takes, but instead to hear our takes, starting with Thursday Night Football. It's the Houston Texans. It is the New York Jets. I don't know how many times the Jets can be on primetime while still being a bad football team. And, I feel like we're packing the Jets in for so many primetime games while they're really bad. And then they're going to get like, okay, they're going to become somewhat competitive. And then they're just going to be on the 1 p.m. slate because, of course, that's how the Jets want to do things. But
yeah, they're going to get flexed out of primetime every chance that the league gets to do that. Yeah.
At this point in time. Texans, they're a beat-up football team. They're going up against the Jets, who feels like, if last week wasn't do or die against New England Patriots, it doesn't get much more do or die than right now for the rails falling off. They're hosting this Thursday Night Football matchup against the Texans. As we often do, we'll start with a matchup that matters, then we'll get into a plus factor in this game. Carmen, I'll start with you. What is your matchup that matters to watch for Thursday Night Football?
Yeah, I don't know how long we're going to keep doing this of like, this is the do or die game. Like, they lost to the Patriots last week. Like
it feels like one of those that game and this whole situation with the Jets feels like whenever you tell your friends like, All right, I'll do one more. And then like it doesn't go, and then it doesn't go well for you, and you just go, okay, no, but that didn't count. This is the last one. This is the last one here that feels like it's the Jets season.
I literally just got an idea that I should have tweeted out last week, but I didn't. Like the Ocean's 11, like, do you think we need one more? Okay, we'll get one more.
I
Like,
didn't see the Ocean's movies until like 2 months ago.
Trev, what? How are we even friends? That's like one of the most important franchises of my entire life. Like
The movies were good.
Doing?
I'm not saying the movies were bad, but I have a lot of like gaps in my movie knowledge. Like I didn't see Indiana Jones movies until like a year ago, and I didn't see the Lord of the Rings movies until like 3 months ago, and then I didn't see the Ocean's movies until like 2 months ago. But I'm catching up. I'm getting there. I get the reference.
All right. As long as you caught up.
I understood you.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't have any. I'm done having any sort of like expectations of the New York Jets. I get it. Like I was the one that was campaigning about how Aaron Rodgers won 4 of his last 5 games in Green Bay after they had a disappointing season and they just missed the playoffs because of a very spiteful Lions team, which was hilarious. But I can't in good faith say that the Jets have anything left for this season. And I don't like it's going to depend on how much this team can keep fighting. Can Aaron Rodgers will his guys to more production or to production that matters? That's the question here. But it has to stem from the Jets offense and how they're going to go up against these Houston corners and the Houston secondary. So Garrett Wilson did earn the trust from Aaron Rodgers because as of right now, he's first among wide receivers in targets, in catches. He's tied for 6th with 573 yards. 225 yards after the catch, so he's doing a lot for Aaron Rodgers on top of just catching the ball. And 31 catches gaining a first down, which is tied for 2nd. He's an extremely productive player. Get the ball to him. How much does Davante Adams take away from Garrett Wilson's targets? We're still getting Davante Adams apparently ramped up because he just clearly wasn't trying in Vegas. So the effort needs to get back up there, and he needs to get back up to speed with his old buddy, but that's the only hope that the Jets have for contending with, yes, a Houston offense and Houston team in general that is banged up, but still an extraordinarily good team, has a ton of talent, and oh, by the way, CJ Stroud. So you're going to need to keep pace with what the Houston offense is capable of scoring if you have any shot at this game. So that's my matchup that matters there is basically these receivers in the Houston secondary.
No, I agree with you, especially the Davante Adams side of things. Like I think we're going to see more targets for Davante than we have yet with him in a Jets uniform with their back completely against the wall. If it wasn't over last week, then, this is the week where it's like, okay, well, Rodgers is going to go down swinging. It feels like he's going to give Davante 15 targets this game. And not that Garrett Wilson's not going to get his own as well, but I really feel like they're going to force the ball to Davante Adams. And I think the other team is going to know that as well. But, you mentioned how much the Texans can really light up the scoreboard, and they definitely can. But still no Nico Collins. This is the last year there. This is the last week that he is on IR. Stephon Diggs now out for the year with a torn ACL. And so it is going to look a little bit different. So my matchup that matters is John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson, that kind of next man up receiver outside of Tank Dell. How are they going to be able to play in this game? Because both of those guys a little bit lower, as you would expect, in the wide receiver threat percentage, being able to get targets per route they're running out there. But how can Tank Dell take on those wide receiver 1 looks? I think that is an interesting storyline going up against the Jets defensive backs of Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, Michael Carter as well in the slot. So really, to me, it just kind of comes down to what are the Texans going to be able to get out of wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3? Dalton Schultz, a big part of this offense as well. I don't mean to, downplay that, but can you stay as diverse in your passing attack with Mechie and Hutchinson, as those 2 guys, as opposed to, well, we had Nico as the 1, Stephon Diggs the 2, and Tank Dell as the 3. It looks very different now that Tank Dell is elevated all the way to the 1. I also want to stay on that side of the football to talk about my plus factor here, which is Quinnen Williams, sack and a half last week, and he's going up against an interior offensive line that's one of the worst in the NFL. Now, I want to be honest here and say that Kenyon Green's blocking grade in the 40s for the Texans is bringing that down that group as a whole, but They're 25th in the NFL when it comes to blocking grade for just their interior offensive linemen. And as much as I think the offensive guys are kind of fed up with the losing ways for the Jets, I think Quinnen's fed up too. And this could be a big time Quinnen Williams-Eats type of a performance. I think he could get 2 sacks in this game with how much the interior offensive line is struggling for the Texans. Now, Stroud's been able to play well under pressure. We'll see if he continues to be able to do that. But I do think that Quinnen is going to be able to get into the backfield. Who's your plus factor in this game?
Yeah, I'm sticking kind of to the Jet side of things just because of, again, I guess I am playing into the do or die thing with all of this. I don't know. I keep saying it's over if they lose this game, and then they lose the game, and I'm like, oh well, it's Breece Hall, and it's because he rounds out the Jets offense. I talked about the receivers and going against guys like Derek Stingley Jr., but Breece Hall is included in that because he does catch the ball out of the backfield so much. He is such a reliable target for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, 2 games ago, you're looking at 6 catches for 103 yards for Breece Hall. So you know that he has that kind of capability. And the fact that he is also, you need to get that run game going again, just to balance everything out offensively and keep this Houston defense kind of on its toes. So I just want to see what Breece Hall can add and how well they can figure out how to use him, because I just feel like he's, for a majority of this season, has been underutilized by the New York Jets. And I'm sure a ton of Breece Hall fantasy owners would probably agree with me.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers obviously gets all the headline, but I feel it's like the Jets offense goes as Breece Hall goes. So that is without a doubt a good plus factor to watch in this one. Heading to the 1 p.m. games on Sunday, we're going to start with the Dallas Cowboys at the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons coming off a big win against the Buccaneers. Cowboys coming off against a loss against the San Francisco 49ers. Matchup that matters. What do you got here, Carmen?
This is going to be the matchup that matters with the Dallas Cowboys for the foreseeable future until it gets fixed, which is their run defense. And it kind of looked like it was better last game, but then they still gave up well over 100 yards on the ground. So it's Bijan Robinson versus this Dallas run defense. They have a 37.7 run defense grade. In PFF, that's 30th in the league. 20 tackles for loss or no gain, which is the fewest in the league against the run. They're tied for the most rushing yards per game given up with Carolina, 154.6, 30th in yards per play overall. So then you look at Bijan Robinson, 90.9 rushing grade, which is 2nd in the league. That's something that is a strength for this Atlanta offense, and it is a matchup that can be exploited against this Dallas Cowboys team. It's abysmal. I mean, there's no excuse for how bad really this Dallas defense is overall, given that that was supposed to be the strength. And I know they've been without Micah Parsons and a couple of other pieces there on that side, but there's really just no excuse for letting up the exorbitant amount of yards that they are on a game in and game out basis.
Yeah, I think it has to be the matchup that matters here, because of sort of what you were saying, and it really is biggest strength on biggest weakness. I mean, just to give some more statistics, the Falcons in the run game, they're 1st in the NFL in rushing grade. And so it's not just the fact that the Falcons like to run the football and the Cowboys aren't really good at defending it. Falcons are excellent at running the football, and that is exactly how they want to win the football game. And they've been the best in the NFL at it with a 91.7 PFF rushing grade as a team. Bijan Robinson alone, a 90.9 rushing grade this season. That is 2nd only to Derrick Henry. You mentioned how much the Cowboys have struggled defending the run. And I think people who listen to the show are probably like, oh man, we're kind of sick of hearing this. But until they're able to fix it, or at least raise the floor a little bit, it's hard to not point this out, specifically this week with a team that really wants to run the football. It's not just Bijan Robinson either. Tyler Algier has a rushing grade above 80 so far this season. So whether it's Bijan Robinson out there or whether they're subbing in Tyler Algier, there is no let up. There is no quit with this team. They are going to try to run the ball down your throat every single game. And so this one in particular, they got to be licking their chops about it. When it comes to the plus factor for me, I think that it's any receiver not named CeeDee Lamb for the Dallas Cowboys, because it kind of has to be. I think that the Cowboys went into this season, and the way that I think navigated the offseason was that, oh yeah, we'll be just as good as we were last year. And that just rarely works. If you don't evolve, you normally get worse. If your roster for the most part stays exactly the same, if you didn't really try to elevate in one level or another, you're probably going to go backwards. That's insulting to NFL defensive coordinators to think that you could have a whole season's worth of tape, even for as good as it looked with the Dallas Cowboys last year and Dak Prescott, who was playing at an MVP level, for you to just say, yeah, now we're good. I mean, Tony Pollard, not on the team anymore. Tyron Smith, Tyler Biadasz, not on the team anymore. We're good to go. We got Dak, we got CeeDee Lamb, we'll be fine. They are reaping what they sowed this past offseason. And now somebody has to step up other than CeeDee Lamb. When you look at CeeDee Lamb, by far the most receiving yards on this team, almost double the next guy, which is Jalen Tolbert. And those two players are the only players who have over 300 yards receiving so far this season. The last 3 weeks, CeeDee Lamb's at a threat percentage, which is a wide receiver usage percentage, which is a great stat that you guys can go see if you got a PFF Plus subscription. That's 40% is absurd. 40% is you are leaning on a guy way too much, even for a player as talented as CeeDee Lamb. It's got to be more diverse than that. So I think he's a plus factor in this one for me. Somebody other than CeeDee Lamb's got to step up for the Cowboys.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page. And I mean, if you look at even last year, when the Dallas Cowboys did have a run game with Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb still had 30% of the team's receiving targets because that is the only reliable receiver that you have. He's the only weapon on the Dallas Cowboys now currently that defenses are afraid of. And this was something I talked at length about going into the season, about how there was not another person that makes the defense concerned, and therefore they can afford to spend all of their attention or pay all of their attention to CeeDee Lamb. It's wild to me that CeeDee Lamb is still as productive as he is, given the fact that he is the only thing that is propelling this Dallas Cowboys offense. And you're right, there has to be other guys that step up. And I know that Brandon Cooks was hurt. You do not have depth in that receiver room. So then I go to a guy like Jake Ferguson, who I thought was going to be a much bigger part of this offense because of how good he is in the receiving game, how much he can be used as a safety blanket for Dak Prescott on some of those short to intermediate routes. And he's tough as all nails to hell, whatever I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here. Yeah. But he literally is a really just solid, reliable player. He's not flashy. I'm not going to call him one of the best tight ends in football yet, but I think that he has that capability if you just feed him. So why are you not doing that? Because also, you don't have a run game to fall back on this year, and you knew that you weren't going to have one. And it's mind-boggling to me, the team building strategy by the Dallas Cowboys, and to expect all these different results just because you paid Dak Prescott. You paid Dak Prescott, but you need to invest in that. You don't need to have two rookies starting on the offensive line in front of him. Like, what are we doing, Dallas? I could go on and on about this for so long, Trev, because it just... The argument that they have all these all pros or whatever on this team, it's like, first of all, a lot of those guys are on the defense. Second of all, you have two offensive linemen that were all pros last year, but then you kind of cancel that out when you put rookies out there, because then you have to kind of mesh all of that together. And then what do you have left on offense? Dak Prescott cannot do it alone. Nobody can do it alone. So I'm out on the Cowboys. I was out on them in the beginning of the year, despite the huge paycheck to Dak Prescott. I don't put it on Dak Prescott. I know he could play better, but I don't know what you want him to do when his only target is CeeDee Lamb, and that's what the defenses pay attention to.
I would be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that Deron Bland is back this week, getting activated off of IR, led the league in interceptions last year, with 9, an absurd 5 of them returned for a touchdown. And so I'm not going to sit here and, expect that he's going to get another pick 6 in this game. It would be incredible if he did. But when you do look at the Cowboys coverage unit, they are bottom half of the league when it comes to coverage grade as a team and the total interceptions that they have. So getting Bland out there is going to help. And sometimes it is those one possessions that you could maybe swing in your favor and getting a turnover that can mean all the difference in the world. On the Falcons side of things, don't mean to be short about them. They have won 4 out of the last 5. They are rolling. If they win this game, they're at New Orleans, and we'll see what New Orleans can be. We'll preview them in a second here. But this is a really good stretch of games here for the Falcons, and they're certainly, creating some distance between them and the next team in the NFC South, especially with the Buccaneers being as beat up as they are. So big week for the Falcons to continue to up that lead that they have in the NFC South, that they could look convincing once again in this one against the Cowboys. But kind of sounds like we both believe that could be the case. Broncos Ravens, a game that probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, people would have looked at it and been like, man, this is going to be an absolute blowout. And I don't think you could say that anymore, as much as our director of content, Gordon, as a Ravens fan, would like for me to say that. I'm not going to do it. What's the matchup that matters here, Carmen? What do you think? Are you as in it? This game could be a close one as me, or do you think that this is going to be a little bit more one-sided?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's the ultimate parody. And then after what happened in Cleveland this last, you just really never know. And I do think that the Ravens are going to come back with a vengeance, but we saw that Lamar Jackson wasn't practicing today, at least during the portion that media was allowed out at practice. Lamar was not there. He finished the game in Cleveland, but, did get banged up, and you wonder how much of that is going to linger. But then at the same time, you also have a guy named Derrick Henry. So them against this Denver defense, the Denver defensive line, how do you contain this rushing attack that is just something that most teams aren't built to defend? But I do have a lot of faith in this Denver defensive line, in the defense in general, just given their physicality and given how productive they are in stopping opposing offenses in general. You look at what Lamar Jackson has been excelling at this year, and I know we're talking about what he is as a run threat, but he's passing the ball better than he ever has. And Denver's defense has only allowed 8 passing touchdowns, which is tied for 7th. And they've gotten 177 pressures, which is 24 more than any other team. So they know how to affect the quarterback. They know how to limit production. 16 completions allowing 20 or more yards. That's it. So that's tied for 2nd fewest in the league. It's an incredibly stifling unit is what I'm getting at. And I really do think that they match up well with what this Baltimore offense tries to do. And now we're going to see if Deontay Johnson is a factor.
Right.
We'll get to that in a little bit. But you now have a couple more receiving options that really rounds out this Ravens offensive attack that makes it that much more lethal. And you can't really sell out on anything, whether it's against the run, loading the box, doing all that kind of stuff, because then the Ravens can still go over top. If you keep, your nickel package on the field, how effective is that against Derrick Henry? It presents a lot of hard decisions for defenses, but I do think that with the physicality of this Denver defense, and especially that defensive line, they might be better suited than most teams, and I do think this will be a good matchup.
I think that the other side of the ball is just important of a matchup, because I do agree with you, but I'm really excited to see this game from Bo Nix's perspective, because over the last couple of weeks, Bo Nix has been playing very well. Now, he hasn't been pressured a ton, right? When you look at over the last 4 weeks, he's 9th in the NFL in passing grade at 77.5. He's 12th in the NFL in passing grade when he's passing 10 or more yards. But all of that to say, 41 of his 66 dropbacks that he has had, where a time to throw was 2.5 seconds or more, he wasn't pressured. And so that is a heavy percentage of his plays where he really was not pressured. And the Denver Broncos offensive line has been blocking very well for him. What's it going to look like this week? Because this Baltimore defensive line and this Baltimore front just overall is a much better unit. It's one of the better units that he's going to face so far this season. 139 pressures from Baltimore so far this season. That's 13th in the NFL. And so it's a great test for Nix, who has been able to play well while he's been kept clean, including pushing the ball deeper down the field. Is he still able to find those shots here this game against the Ravens, especially as a road team, right? And I think that goes into it as well. That kind of rolls right into my plus factor for this game. Is not only does Nix have to play continually just as well as he has, maybe not just as well, but good enough under pressure this week, he also has to continue to push the ball deep down the field. It was a big area of criticism of him coming into the NFL, is that Oregon's offense didn't really need him to do that very often. He was sort of inexperienced with it. He had his misses, and I think earlier this year he had some of those as well, but he has been better at that lately. There's 2 wide receivers in particular, Marvin Mims Jr. and Troy Franklin. These guys have to be the plus factors, in my opinion, because when you look at these guys, 13.0 average depth of target for Marvin Mims, 15.6 average depth of target for Troy Franklin. Those are the two highest on the team. And so they have averaged the most yards per target, or yards, or average depth of target, excuse me, on the team. And if Bo Nix is going to continue to be good pushing the ball deep down the field, I think those guys are going to have to be heavily involved. When you look at the Ravens on the other side of things, when it comes to passes of 15 yards or more, they have a 28.4 coverage grade as a team. That's one of the worst in the league. So we saw this, we've seen this over the last couple of weeks. The Ravens struggle to defend the deep passes. Sometimes Denver struggles to do so. Are they going to be able to capitalize and stay on this good run here that Nix has, pushing the ball deep down the field against a defense that has been susceptible to it at this point in the year? So that matchup that matters sort of rolls right into my guys that need to step up for that to be the case for Bo Nix. But who's your plus factor in this game?
Well, speaking of deep passes and deep targets, my plus factor is Zay Flowers now with the addition of Deontay Johnson, because what does Zay Flowers excel at? It's those deep passes. He's got 26 catches gaining a first down, 15 catches gaining 15 or more yards, which is tied for 4th in the league. These are top 10 numbers from Zay Flowers. If you allow him to be the guy that is the deep threat, that gets to go down the field, that stretches the field that way, because you have another receiver that can do some of the other stuff that Deontay Johnson can underneath, intermediate, all of that kind of stuff, it's going to open things up entirely for Zay Flowers. And given that Deontay Johnson is new to this team, we don't know how much he's going to play. But at the very least, I would expect him to still be on the field, again, creating something that the defense has to contend with, which could take some of the attention off of Zay Flowers. And I really think that there is now an opportunity for Zay to take advantage of that and to get into some mismatches. And you have a quarterback that can absolutely identify those mismatches in Lamar Jackson and also allow for time for Zay Flowers to get down the field and to get those deep strikes and to push the ball down the field in those chunk plays when you're not just ground and pounding it with Derrick Henry.
Let's do Bills Dolphins next. This is the next game that I want to get to here. This one's in Buffalo. Buffalo's coming off of a pretty convincing win with the Seattle Seahawks. And honestly, I don't mean this to be insulting to any Buffalo Bills fans who might be watching and listening to the show, but I feel like Buffalo is playing better than certainly I expected them to play this season. I looked at their roster and I said, man, it's going to take a lot from Josh Allen. I feel like there might be a little bit too much on his plate, but the team is playing well as a team. And I think that you see that in the win column as well. They've been really good over the last 3 or 4 years. They continue to be good this year. Divisional matchup. Tua Tagovailoa is back in the lineup. I think the offense looked a lot more like we are used to seeing from Miami last week, albeit in a loss. But Carmen, what's your matchup that matters here for this divisional matchup?
Yeah, I think that Josh Allen took that overrated comment pretty to heart, or pretty personally.
Yeah.
Because, when we talk about Josh Allen as being one of the elite quarterbacks here, that does include being able to elevate the team around you. And I think I was higher on the Buffalo Bills actually than most people were coming into this season, because I had a lot of faith in Josh Allen. Honestly, the biggest thing that made me question how good the Bills were going to be was the Matt Milano injury, which was just heartbreaking for him as a player, given how good he is and how much he means to that defense. And were they going to be able to contend with it? And they have. But to get to my matchup that matters, though, it actually ends up being a guy like James Cook. And another one that, he kind of had a breakout season last year. And I felt like, all right, this is only going to continue to ascend. And we've seen kind of some up and down production from him this season so far in Buffalo's willingness to run the ball. But then you saw games like this last one against Seattle where they handed the ball off to James Cook 17 times, 111 yards, multiple touchdowns. This is something that James Cook should be used for on a consistent basis, because again, it opens things up for Josh Allen, for the receivers, which, having Amari Cooper now a little bit more entrenched in the scheme, that should really help out this and round out this offense. But I really still think that even with Josh Allen as your quarterback and having Amari Cooper, that you should still look to the ground more often than not, or at least have a really even split when you have a guy like James Cook, who is also capable of catching some passes too out of the backfield. So he's just such a good, well-rounded dual threat player. And I could not be happier for the way that he's been able to produce when he's trusted with the ball. So keep doing it, Buffalo.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. James Cook's a massive part of this offense, and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. So I think that that's a really good shout out by you. You know, we're looking for the Dolphins to sort of snap back into this just really explosive offense, and they're what is it? 16 plays, gaining 20 or more yards, at least in the NFL at this point in time. Now, obviously, you're missing Tua Tagovailoa for a lot of that, but I don't know if this matchup against Buffalo is the one where you're really going to be able to see them kind of snap back into place. Because when you look at the Buffalo Bills and they're covering deep passes, they're ninth best in the NFL in receptions to 15 or more yards allowed. They've allowed just 20 so far this year, and they're eighth best in the NFL at completion percentage allowed when passing 15 or more yards down the field at just 33.5%. So Buffalo's defense is sort of made to put a cap on what passing offenses are able to do. And I think that that rolls right into my plus factor, which is Tyreek Hill for this game, who has yet to have a 100-yard game against the Buffalo Bills in his career, whether it's been with the Miami Dolphins or the Kansas City Chiefs. So Tyreek, who, you know, we're doing the show on a Wednesday, so we've got some, you know, injury reports to kind of monitor throughout the next couple of days. But Hill, they didn't see him at the open portion of practice when the media was there for a foot injury. I didn't see anything super serious there. It's obviously worth monitoring. But when if he plays, which I think he's going to play this week, he is going to be a major X factor in what they're able to do, because can they truly break this Buffalo Bills defense and do exactly what they want to do and be that explosive offense? Because we just have not seen that a lot yet from Miami, and they're sort of running out of time for, even if they get back to the version of this offense that we think they're going to be, is it going to be too little too late when it comes to the win column because of how poorly they played while Tua Tagovailoa was out? So look for Tyreek Hill to be the spark, as he often can be. I know that's sort of an obvious one, but certainly with a team that knows how to play him well, if he can really get over the top, at least even once, it might make the big difference here in this divisional matchup. But what's your plus factor here?
Yeah, mine was Tyreek Hill too, because you looked at, I mean, he talked a lot when Tua was coming back last week ahead of the Cardinals game, where he said, "Oh, we're back, baby, we're back." And to his credit, it was a little bit. I mean, he had 6 catches on 9 targets, 72 yards in that game. That's certainly not what we think of, though, when we think of Tyreek Hill going off or him and Tua Tagovailoa being back. So I really do think that was a ramp-up game. And to be clear, I completely understand it. Obviously, that's Tua's first game back in the lineup. He's still getting adjusted back to game speed, all that other stuff. But I absolutely now think, like, you need to start being the Tyreek Hill and Tua Tagovailoa that we know, and pushing the ball down the field minimum, 10, 15 yards, and then using that speed, if you're Tyreek Hill, to then go the rest of the way. I want to see fireworks. I want to see the guy that had over 200 yards in the first quarter against the Buccaneers just a few years ago, which I was that I will never forget, literally, when he was still with the Kansas City Chiefs in that Super Bowl year. So that was not in the Super Bowl, but in that year when they played them.
Right. Earlier in the year,
crystal clear again. That's the kind of production I want to see out of Tyreek Hill, because if you're going to talk like that, you need to back it up. And 72 yards isn't impressing me when I know what you're capable of.
Dave Salfaro, our Do Everything guy at PFF, wanted to make sure that I corrected myself here. Hill did have 150 receiving yards in the 2021 AFC Championship game against Buffalo. He's never had 100 yards against them in the regular season.
So got it.
Just wanted to make sure that we got that correct before we moved on here. But I do agree with you. I think he's got to play a major factor here for this game. Divisional matchup is the New Orleans Saints against the Carolina Panthers. This team already matched up in week 1 of the season, and my matchup that matters is sort of the New Orleans Saints maybe against themselves for this one, right? Because when you look at how this matchup happened in week 1, it was not even close. The Saints had an 83.6 passing grade against the Panthers. They had a 76.0 rushing grade, and basically everything the New Orleans Saints wanted to do on offense, they were doing. When you look at the statistics, it's not like Derek Carr was blowing the doors off in the passing game, or Alvin Kamara had 1 million rushing yards. They were just extremely efficient in what they were doing, and Clint Kubiak was really rolling against this Panthers defense. Panthers defense, they were the worst in the NFL in week 1. We just didn't really know that yet. And unfortunately, we have to view them the same as one of the worst, if not the worst defense in the NFL here in this matchup. Derek Carr is kind of coming back. They don't have Rashid Shaheed in this one. There's some other injuries that they're going through, but like Talize Fuanga, for example, is back in the lineup here. And so, can the Saints still have that sort of success on the road now with the Panthers? Now, Andy Dalton was a full participant in the early portions of practice this week. Jonathan Brooks was as well. So perhaps we get those guys into the lineup and maybe it changes things. Because remember, Bryce Young was the starting quarterback when these two teams faced off in week one. So that could change things a bit here. But I still believe it's the New Orleans Saints versus themselves. It's the Rocky quote in Creed where he's just like, oh yeah, take a look in the mirror. That's the toughest opponent that you're going to have to face. And that's basically the Saints, how they're going to go into this game. They're basically looking in the mirror and it's like, okay, if we don't beat ourselves, right, we should take care of business against the Panthers here, whether it is Bryce Young or Andy Dalton who is starting. Now, I'm not going to say it's going to look as easy as it did in week one, but this is still New Orleans' game to lose, in my opinion. And so for me, it is simply the Saints have enough back from the team that we saw in week one that has missed a good chunk of this year in between, that they should be able to get the victory here. But what about you? What do you think the matchup that matters is?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to isolate kind of one bright spot and one strength of the Carolina Panthers, defensively at least, and that's J.C. Horn. They're trading away, they're kind of fire sailing certain things, and you know that between that and the injuries that they've sustained, there's not a whole lot of bright spots, unfortunately, on this Carolina Panthers team. But J.C. Horn is one of them, and so what is he going to do against Chris Olave? So if you're talking about a matchup that's going to give Carolina a chance, you're going to need to limit Chris Olave, especially, having Derek Carr back and seeing how much of a boost that's going to be for the Saints offense. But Olave this season, I mean, even with kind of the shuffling around, he's still tied for seventh in PFF grade at an 82. Now, he only has 387 yards, which ranks 30th among receivers. 21 catches gaining first down, that's tied for 20th among receivers, which are still good numbers, but obviously have been affected by the fact that his starting quarterback did go down for quite some time. But J.C. Horn, he's allowed 3 touchdowns. He has 1 interception on the year, 8 forced incompletions. He can certainly get to the ball, but can he actually make the play? Can he get more, take the ball away, make sure that he's limiting the Saints' production? That's going to be a really interesting matchup to me.
Yeah, I think that's a big time matchup. There's no doubt. Like, I have Chris Olave on here, and if Chris Olave doesn't play well, I don't know. I don't know if this team continues to play well, certainly with Rashid Shaheed not there. But man, I mean, you look at it last game, I think Chris Olave had over 100 yards, right, against the Los Angeles Chargers, and Alvin Kamara had a 6.7 yards per carry average. And that, to me, is a lot of things were working for the Saints, and they scored 8 points in that game. I thought their third down conversion percentage really since week 2. And I think that's the plus factor here in this one is Derek Carr's return, but also the plus factor is simply like Klint Kubiak. We were praising Klint Kubiak after those first 2 weeks, and we were like, man, this guy's the next, he's the next great thing in the NFL. He's going to be a head coach someday. And they have lost 6 games in a row now, and they're third down percentage and red zone scoring percentage have really gone down, certainly since Derek Carr has gotten hurt. I know that that's certainly context that you have to think about here, but to me, the plus factor is Klint Kubiak in the red zone. Can we finish these drives with touchdowns? That's a big thing that you need to look out for, not just to get off the shine and get a win here for the Saints, but also moving forward. Like, can you have faith? All due respect, a lot of teams have beaten the Carolina Panthers so far this year. Can you do something this week that makes me feel as though a win against the Carolina Panthers would actually give me some faith that now that Derek Carr is back, you're moving up and moving forward? So that's a plus factor in this one. Obviously is, in my opinion, if Jonathan Brooks plays, I think Jonathan Brooks could be a big time plus factor as well, because now no Deontay Johnson, you're going to rely on the ground game more than you ever have. The offensive line for Carolina has not been nearly as bad as people thought it was going to be going into the season.
It's actually pretty decent.
We have seen Chuba Hubbard play very well at certain stretches throughout the season. I think throwing a guy who I had as RB1 in last year's running back class before he got hurt, Jonathan Brooks, getting a little two-headed monster here and really being a team that fortifies its identity on the ground. I think that could be huge for Carolina as well. So a couple of different plus factors that I think could be for both sides here, but that's what I got in this game. What's your plus factor here?
I really do hope that, I think a lot about the fact that Carolina now has the run game and offensive line coaches from the Bucs, when the Bucs didn't really have that successful of a run game. And whether that was a symptom of the fact that Bruce Arians just wanted to pass the ball down the field all the time, but even in the last couple of years, it still wasn't up to the creativity, the diversity, the stuff that we would like to see out of a team that wants to run the ball first or wants to run the ball quite at all. So that's something that I think is an uphill battle for the Carolina Panthers. But you're right. It's something that's absolutely going to be needed because you don't really have another choice now on this offense if you want to get some offense at all, some offensive production. But my plus factor for this is Derek Carr because things have changed, for the Saints since the last time that he played, namely along that offensive line. They've suffered multiple injuries along that offensive line. It's not clicking it the way it was when Derek Carr went down. That's something he's going to have to overcome. You mentioned not having Rashid Shaheed as well. So how can he operate this offense with with a lot more limitations than he had prior to going down? And if he can still kind of make it work, if him and Clint Kubiak can combine forces, and I think the Saints do still have enough, to be a really successful and productive offense when you talk about the fact they do have Chris Olave, and then you've got Alvin Kamara that balances so much out, acts as one of those check down receivers on top of being able to run the football very, very well. That's plenty for this New Orleans Saints offense to get going, especially against a Carolina Panthers defense that is just not what we had hoped it would be, prior to the year starting.
Mohal in the chat before we move on to the next game saying Canales already announced that Bryce Young will start. He wants Andy Dalton 100%. So it looks like it is going to be Bryce Young in this game.
So the Saints get Bryce Young again.
I get Bryce Young again. And I don't know if that's good for Carolina. I understand wanting Andy Dalton to be 100% and making sure that he's 100%. This
is another reason that the run game is going to be so incredibly crucial.
Yes, 100%. Chargers, Browns, both teams coming off pretty big wins. I mean, the Chargers looked really good against New Orleans Saints, and the Browns get an upset win against the Baltimore Ravens this past week with Jameis Winston now as the starting quarterback. Carmen, I'm very curious. In a matchup that a couple of weeks ago might have felt like a snooze fest, now it really doesn't anymore. These are two teams that have things to be excited about here. What's the matchup that matters here for you?
Something that gets lost in the Jameis Winston discourse, because we all like to talk about the 30 interceptions and how he's just kind of like this gunslinger in the backfield, and he just wants to make a play happen no matter what, is the fact that he takes a lot of sacks. And that's something that the Cleveland offensive line also does not do well. They have a 55.2 PFF grade, which ranks 31st in the league. They have the 29th ranked pass blocking grade, a 53.6. 117 pressures allowed in pass protection. That's the third most in the league. That, to me, spells a huge matchup when it comes to what the Chargers defensive line can do on the other side, because they're a top 10 unit. They have a 10th ranked PFF grade, 69.7, the Chargers defensive line in particular. Their pass rushing grade, 19th. So it's not necessarily as aggressive as you necessarily want it to be, but there is going to be an opportunity against a Cleveland offensive line that has struggled in this area with a quarterback now that is going to hold the ball. We know that about Jameis Winston because he wants to make the play. He wants the big, bomb down the field. That's exactly how he likes to play, and it takes time, and that's not something that Cleveland has so far afforded their quarterbacks. Will that be different with Jameis Winston? Maybe. Not totally sure, but it's definitely, I feel like, the matchup that's going to matter most for the Cleveland Browns in particular, and how many points that they can put on the board, which isn't necessarily going to have to be that much, given that the Chargers offense we haven't seen be able to go out and blow the top off of games and score a ton of points. But can Cleveland's offensive line allow for production there? We're going to see.
I will continue that conversation, but I will say in week 8, so last week, when they got Wyatt Teller back and Ethan Postic's back in the lineup, Joel Bitonio looked better because those guys were there. Really, the only weak link left was DeJuan Jones because Jedrick Wills was out. And the offensive line actually had, because I totally agree with you, we've pointed this out in the past, and as a season, the Browns offensive line is really disappointed, but they have been hurt a little bit. Last week, it felt like they were the most healthy they had been in a while, and they actually had a 69.8 passing grade. So it was better last week. Will that continue? Is this the new Cleveland Browns? I don't say new because it's kind of like the old Cleveland Browns, but is this the Browns offensive line that we're going to see moving forward, what we saw last week? Because I agree with you 100%. Jameis wants to hold on to the ball. He wants to push it deep down the field. You have to be better at pass protection, but at least they were last week. So I'm very curious if that continues against a Chargers defensive line that is pretty solid at getting after the quarterbacks. That is also my matchup that matters, but giving Cleveland a little bit more optimism, maybe from what it has been
Sure.
certainly at the in the middle of the season. My plus factor here, though, is I mean, we've got two quarterbacks who can light it up. I mean, we know that Jameis is fearless when it comes to pushing the ball deep down the field. We certainly saw that last week as well. He attempted a lot more of those like NFL open passes, which is a nice way of saying like my wide receiver's not open at all, but I'm just going to give him a chance because that's what you have to do at the NFL level. Like I think of the David Njoku catch, and that's 100% the example there, right? Where David Njoku not open at all whatsoever, but James just goes, nah, I'm going to believe in my guy, and he's going to give him a chance, and he ends up coming down with it for a touchdown. That's sort of what you have to do at times in the NFL. James doesn't fear those kinds of throws. Very clearly, Justin Herbert does not either. 9 big-time throws for Justin Herbert over the last 2 games, 0 turnover-worthy plays. He's got back-to-back elite PFF passing grades over the last 2 weeks. No passer in the NFL has a higher passing grade than Justin Herbert. He was dealing with a high ankle sprain earlier in the season, but holy cow, does he look good now. And so this is a matchup of 2 quarterbacks who sort of have this fearless mentality with them right now, and it could be a little bit more of a high scoring game on the scoreboard than I think people are willing to admit. I don't know what the over under is. I didn't look that up before the show, but I'd be tempted, whatever it is, to probably bet the over in this one, even though the defenses are what we'd like to talk about here. What about you? What's your plus factor?
Yeah, mine's Ladd McConkey because of what you just said about Justin Herbert and Jameis Winston for that matter. But like these are 2 quarterbacks that are unafraid to throw it down the field. And finally, Justin Herbert is being equipped to do that. You mentioned his stats over the last couple of weeks, 95 PFF grade, that's first in that span, 94 passing grade, that's first in that span. So he kind of is finding his rhythm in the pass game, and I think within Jim Harbaugh's offense. And who is he going to throw it to? He's going to throw it to Ladd McConkey. He's got 8 missed tackles forced on receptions too, which is first in the league. 9 catches gaining 15 or more yards. That's 5th in the league. So when you talk about trying to push the ball down the field, trying to be productive, trying to break out of this kind of production lull that we've seen from the Chargers so far this season, this is exactly how Los Angeles does it. And so I'm very interested to see how Ladd McConkey and Justin Herbert's relationship continues to blossom and if that spells more points for the Chargers as it has over the last couple of weeks.
Raiders-Bengals is the next game that I want to get to here. 2 teams that really need a win. There's no doubt about it. I think the Bengals felt like they were really rolling, and then the Eagles really took it to them last week at home. The Raiders are obviously a team that they've been up and down. I thought they played well last week against Kansas City Chiefs. They seem to play the Chiefs really well. If they could just pretend that a team is the Chiefs every single week, I think that they might have a little bit more wins this season because
maybe they need a puppet for every team.
It's not like a talentless football team here with the Raiders. It just, I don't know. It just has not really been able to come together enough throughout the NFL season. But there's a lot to talk about here in this one. What's the matchup that matters with the Raiders traveling to Cincinnati here?
It's a pretty obvious and probably simplistic one, but it's Max Crosby against Demarius Mims. Given the fact that Max Crosby is the guy that's capable of wreaking havoc on this Bengals offensive line, which hasn't done super well for Joe Burrow this season so far. A 64.1 pass blocking grade, which ranks 21st in the league. Overall, 59.0 PFF grade, which is 28th in the league. And they haven't really allowed for this offense to be multidimensional in Cincinnati because they cannot figure out how to run the ball successfully. And that's partially due, again, to the offensive line having a 52.1 PFF run blocking grade, which ranks 31st. So that's something that I look at and I'm like, all right, well, you've got a guy like Max Crosby who can affect the quarterback so incredibly much. He's an absolute game wrecker. 78.8 PFF grade this season, which is 15th. And that's not even like kind of the gaudy numbers that we're even used to seeing, but that's really because Max Crosby is kind of doing this on his own for that the Raiders defensive line right now. I just think that that's going to be how Demarius Mims holds up. He's been in and out of injury, fighting through certain things, and so far, like how healthy is he really, and can he stand up to Max Crosby? Is my matchup that's going to matter most, I think, for Joey B. And
to me, it's who wins the rushing battle, and you touched on that a little bit with what you were talking about there, but. Total rushing yards this season. The Raiders, 31st in the NFL. The Bengals, 27th. Rushes of 10 or more yards this year. Raiders, 28th. Bengals, 22nd. First downs gained while rushing this season. Raiders, dead last. Bengals, 28th. I mean, it's just 2 of the most inefficient run games that we have in the NFL. And I feel as though, look, if we're looking at this game objectively, we get T. Higgins back in this game. I don't know if the Raiders are going to be able to keep up on the scoreboard.
Right.
But I think that even if the Bengals win this football game, you need to see them run the ball better. And that's why, like, this is a matchup that matters for me, not just to win this football game, but moving forward for the Bengals. Joe Burrow came out in the media and he said, what, like, we've got to win 7 of our next 9 games. He's like, that's doable. And it is doable,
for sure.
But it's not doable if you're as one-dimensional as the Bengals are right now. And it feels like too often their rushing attack is not enough a part of this offense that it needs to be. They're leaning way too much in the passing game. And I get it. Joe Burrow's playing fantastic. The receivers are great. You want to lean into that and let that be the strength or your bread and butter of how you create your offensive attack. But it's just got to be way better in the run game. And so this is an area where even if the Bengals win this football game, if they cannot run the ball better, I'm not going to feel great about this team moving forward, because the mountain ahead of them is steep, and they have to have such a low margin for error moving forward. And then the plus factor to me, obviously, like, Brock Bowers is a really big plus factor for this team. You mentioned Max Crosby, some of the other guys on the defense side of the ball as well. I think Robert Spillane is playing really well. He's got to play better in coverage, but he's really good at defending the run. I think just overall, the linebackers are good at defending the run there for the Raiders. But ultimately, I've just got to pick the easy one. It's Minshew, right? Look at the 2 games that the Raiders were the most competitive. Minshew scored a passing grade above 70. They don't have the offensive identity to have Minshew not play well and then go, well, it's all right, our run game picked us up. I just mentioned some of the stats there. Alexander Mattison had 15 rushing yards on 14 carries last week. If Minshew does not play well, the team does not have a chance on the scoreboard. And that's just the way that it is. I hate sometimes bringing up the obvious because we got a lot of different data points. We got a lot of different depth that we can talk about every single game. But at the end of the day, the 2 most competitive games, including that win against the Ravens, that the Raiders have had so far this season, it was that game against the Ravens, which they won, and the game that they just played against the Kansas City Chiefs, which they lost. That was the game in which they were the most competitive against teams that were actually tough teams. And it was just because Minshew played really good. And if he does not play at that level, I don't know what else they have. But what's your plus factor here?
Yeah, it goes back to what you were talking about with this rushing attack. And my plus factor is Chase Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals, because I don't think it's a coincidence that the Bengals win when Brown averages over 4.5 yards a carry. And it's not as simplistic as saying, yeah, of course, like, if the running back is doing well, it's just that another component that defenses then have to respect. And if you are being productive on the ground, if you're getting 4.5 yards a carry out of your running backs, then you're going to have to kind of, again, switch up how you're defending the Cincinnati Bengals and not sell out on defending Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and all those guys that Joe Burrow can get the ball to beautifully when they're healthy. Of course, getting T. Higgins back will be huge, but you touched on it before. You just can't be that one-dimensional if you're the Cincinnati Bengals and expect this season to go well or beyond or up to the expectations. I think, like, I came into the season thinking that the Cincinnati Bengals were one of the heavyweights in the AFC. In order to be that, you need to give defenses a lot to think about, and you need to have a well-rounded offense, which the Cincinnati Bengals just do not. So Chase Brown, feed him the ball, but then do all of the other things that make it easier on him. Help him out in the run blocking game if you're the offensive line. And then I would like to see a little bit more play action from Joe Burrow and trying just to kind of round this all out and make defenses respect the run and just be productive on the ground.
We got a divisional matchup that we're going to preview here. But before we get to that, got to remind people that this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Think of a time when you didn't feel like you could be your full self, right? You were hiding behind a mask. Costumes, masks, Halloween. It's the theme of October here, but we like that for Halloween, or at least Carmen does more than I do. You don't want to be wearing a mask or a costume, at work, in social settings, around your family, like in real life. You want to be able to be your full self. Therapy, it can help you learn to accept all parts of yourself so you can take off the mask and the costume, because it should be for Halloween, but not for the emotions. I've been doing therapy for over 1.5 years, and I've absolutely loved it. It has been for that, right? I've talked about this before. It was something that I needed help with, initially. That's why I signed up for it. That's why I started going. But even after that, I've continued to do it for the last year. And a lot of times when I go, it's not like I have something I really got to get off my chest. I just get to, sometimes talk about the things that are going well. And it also allows you to appreciate when things are going well better. And I love that so much about going every single other week. And it's a really great way to have a better understanding of how your mind works, become more aware of the social patterns that you have, why you react the way that you do. You can make your strengths even stronger, and you can improve some of the parts of yourself that you really want to improve. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's convenient, flexible, entirely online way to get therapy that is right for you. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/PFF to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PFF. Commanders and Giants, the divisional game that I was sort of hinting at that we want to preview here. Commanders coming off a extremely emotional Hail Mary prayer answered victory against the Chicago Bears last week. And the Giants coming off a primetime loss in Monday Night Football against the Pittsburgh Steelers. What do we think here, Carmen? What's the matchup that matters here for this one?
Yeah, I go back to the trenches for this because the Giants' defensive line is a strength of their team, and going against the Commanders' offensive line, which is decent enough. They have a fifth-ranked pass blocking grade, 77.4. Overall, 71.9 PFF grade for the Commanders' offensive line. But the D-line in New York, 130 pressures, which is sixth most in the league. 73.7 PFF pass rushing grade, which is eighth. 67 pressures on third and fourth down. Those crucial downs, third ranked. And then they have 38 sacks according to the PFF metrics. That's first in the league. So that is the absolute strength of this New York Giants team. There's no doubt about that. How are they going to fare against this Commanders offensive line, which has exceeded expectations, my personal expectations for it. And we do know that Jayden Daniels likes to hold on to the ball a little bit because he can make things happen. He scrambles around. We've seen him also want to push the ball down the field. I did an article actually on foxsports.com just kind of comparing and contrasting the first 4 weeks of the season for Jayden Daniels versus the last 4 weeks. First 4 weeks had like the 40th ranked average depth of target for among qualified quarterbacks. And then you look at the last 4 weeks, and he actually has the 5th longest average depth of target. He is trying to push the ball down the field now, which does require him to hold the ball a little bit more, puts a little bit more stress on the offensive line, going against now this New York Giants defensive line. Again, why I think this is the matchup that matters.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that the Commanders' offensive line and the Giants' defensive line is probably the biggest matchup that matters. But I will say, I also want to point out like how Washington is doing in the red zone as a matchup that matters. And now that I'm looking at the sheet, I see that that's a plus factor of yours. So we're kind of just having the same conversation here. But we talked about Washington and their red zone percentage, Cliff Kingsbury, and how great he was in the red zone and how high of a clip they were converting in the red zone through the first couple of weeks of the season. And now that has not been the case. They're down to 41% conversion in the red zone over the last 3 weeks. That's 28th in the NFL. So not only are they not in the top 5 and number 1 in the league like they were at the beginning of the year, they're all the way down near the bottom 5 when you talk about what's been over the last 3 games, the most recent trend here for this team. And so it's been a little bit more shaky. And I'm not saying that we should, hate on this Washington team, but to me, like the offense is looking a little less of a juggernaut than it was certainly when Jayden Daniels was really catching fire in the first couple of weeks in the season. So that's your plus factor though. So I want you to, is there something that I didn't hit there with Washington's red zone that you wanted to hit on here?
Yeah, I mean, that became very, very evident in this last game against the Chicago Bears because the Hail Mary will make you forget that with 25 seconds to go in the game, the Bears had clawed their way back, pun intended, to take the lead in that game. And they were set to take it. They were set to steal it after not leading that entire game. They were trailing the entire game, came back, made it happen. And it was because that Chicago Bears defense stymied the Washington Commanders offense, there it is, in the red zone. They were 0 for 3 on the day. Once inside the red zone, they kicked field goals. And that's not going to cut it against better competition, against better teams, against teams that are more productive on the offensive side of the ball. They were lucky at that point that Caleb Williams and the Bears offense were going through a lot of changes and shuffling around on the offensive line due to injuries, that they had no rhythm for the first 3 quarters of that game. But then Caleb Williams caught fire in his last 2 drives, going 8 of 9 for 85 yards, leads a couple scoring drives, and now the Bears take the lead, and you need a prayer to win that game. The prayer was answered, as we talked about, but you can't live that way by any means. So you need to start scoring when you do move up and down the field with ease. That's great. But what matters is what happens when you get inside the 20. And that's just not something that Washington has been effective at over the last few weeks.
My plus factor in this game is Mike Sainristil, the corner for the Washington Commanders, who I've been so impressed with so far
You've been
this
very
season.
high on him. I
He
think that
was,
was
and,
this
and I mean,
last week too.
when I was, evaluating here for the draft, I thought he was just going to be a slot corner because of his size. I thought his size was going to really limit where he was going to be able to be played. And even with that being the case, I gave him a second round grade. Like even as just a slot corner, I feel like he still would have been worthy of a second round pick. And Washington's looked at him and said, okay, well, you're just a competitive corner. We're going to put you on the outside. So he's played mostly on the outside this season. So he's got that slot corner versatility to him. He had that experience while he was at Michigan. He's a former wide receiver, so he knows how wide receivers think as well. But now he has that outside experience too. This is the perfect candidate to say, all right, I'm going to match up one-on-one against Malik Neighbors. And basically nobody does that. Malik's been pretty much uncoverable so far halfway through his rookie season. And I'm really looking forward to this matchup because if Sainristil can slow down Malik Neighbors at all whatsoever, I don't know what else the Giants really have in this game. Sure, Tyrone Tracy, I think, is going to be a factor. We saw Darius Slate get involved with some of the deep passes, but that's all complimentary stuff, in my opinion, based upon what you get out of Malik Neighbors. And so I wouldn't have said this even a couple of weeks ago, but the Commanders now have somebody in their secondary who you can legitimately match up with against one of the best wide receivers in the NFL and Neighbors. So how Sainristil plays against him could go a long way into, even if Washington maybe isn't going to light the world on fire like we've seen them do in the early parts of the season, they could still be ahead at the end on the scoreboard because of how well they can play Malik Neighbors, starting with Mike Sainristil's role. Patriots at Titans is the next game that I want to hit here. Not great teams. I mean, there's kind of no way around it here, but I'm very curious. What's the matchup that matters here for you, Carmen?
It has to be Ramondre Stevenson against the Tennessee run defense. Ramondre Stevenson, 104 rushes, 422 yards, 5 touchdowns. He is the Patriots offense at this point. And then when you contrast that with how Tennessee fares against the run, they've got a 62.0 PFF grade, which ranks 21st. But they're kind of a bit of a contradiction because they rank 10th in EPA per rush allowed. So I don't really know what to make of them. It seems as though, they're minimizing the damage, but they're not doing it terribly prettily, or terribly beautifully, whatever you want to call it. I just don't trust. I don't trust many things about either of these teams, but I do trust Ramondre Stevenson because of the fact that, he's quarterback proof. He seems to figure out ways to be productive behind the offensive line, and he is the Patriots offense at this point. So he's the one you need to worry about when it comes to playing the New England.
Yeah, obviously, I think that Drake May obviously means a lot in this one. He's going through concussion protocol, but Gerard Mayo said that he was going to be limited at practice, so he looks like he's got a chance to play in this game. And if he does, obviously, I think that raises the ceiling of what the Patriots offense can be. We've certainly seen that at times with him through his first couple of starts here, especially on the ground. Last week, before he went out with that concussion, he had an elite rushing grade. Now, I know it was only 3 carries, but it was enough. I mean, they were able to play really well in that game when he was able to rush the football pretty well. And Ramondre struggled a little bit last week, but still, they're giving him 20 carries. So very clearly they're just going to want to run their offense through him. But man, you look at how much these teams have been struggling. Yards per play this season. Patriots, 4.4, that's 30th in the NFL. Titans, 4.7, that's 28th. Plays gaining 20 or more yards. Patriots, 31st in the NFL. Titans, 29th. And that's why I think that Drake May is really the big matchup that matters here, and his presence can really swing things because he at least gives the Patriots some explosive options here in the run game and the pass game, as we saw last week. So to me, he's a big-time matchup that they really need there. And then I think that, when you look at sort of who really needs to stand out, I would love for Jalen Polk to be able to stand out, man. I really would. I think that he is somebody who needs to step up big time for this team. He's had a really disappointing, I think, start to his rookie career. And no matter who is out there, I feel like Polk has got to be the guy that matters most for them. But who's your plus factor in this game?
It's not a who, it's a what. And it's third down on both sides because on crucial downs, neither of these teams have been terribly effective. New England ranks 24th in third and fourth down conversion percentage allowed, and then they rank 23rd in scoring drive percentage allowed. And then you look at what Tennessee is able to do. They are 30.59% on third down, conversion rate on third down, which is 31st in the league. They have the 30th ranked offense. And you would think that means that they can't stay on the field. but somehow Tennessee is fourth in time of possession average, and I don't really understand how that works. I understand that you're trying, like they don't have explosive plays, so they're just kind of dinking and dunking their way down the field, or their plays aren't going incredibly far, but that usually means that they're not converting then. They're just kind of a conundrum of a team. The Tennessee Titans are averaging the fifth fewest points per game, which is 17.1. So which of these teams can stay on the field? Which of these teams can control the clock? Which of these teams can be the most productive on offense? Breaking analysis here, whoever scores more points is going to win the game, and whoever can, I think it's going to depend again on who can stay on the field, who can convert those third downs and continue drives.
Let's get to the afternoon slate here. Jacksonville Jaguars traveling to the Philadelphia Eagles. Jags, it feels like they're playing better, but came up short against the Green Bay Packers last week. And the Eagles, not surprising necessarily that they won against the Bengals, but winning by 20. Right. I don't know how many people saw that one coming. If you did, kudos to you. So Jags now traveling to Philadelphia for this one. Matchup that matters here, Carmen. What you got?
Devontae Smith, AJ Brown against the Jaguars secondary, and those corners. Now you see again. This is the reason for the resurgence for the Philadelphia Eagles. It's the only reason that there are good vibes, because when these guys were hurt, this offense wasn't productive, even with Saquon Barkley going off, and that's again spelled AWF. So this is, AJ Brown versus single coverage too is just a beautiful thing to watch. It's first among wide receivers, is 97.3 PFF grade. And that's what you're going to try to exploit. It's what you're going to try to get. And that's what happens when both of these receivers are on the field, is that it's really hard to double one or both. And then you look at the other side of things, which the Jaguars cornerbacks, you've got Ronald Darby, Monteric Brown. 26.8 coverage grade over the last 3 weeks for Monteric Brown in single coverage. So that, again, just seems like a matchup that you can very easily exploit. Tyson Campbell, 81.3 grade. He's kind of the bright spot on this for the Jags, but I think that this offense now is firing on all cylinders in Philadelphia, and that's what you're seeing as far as, the vibes improving and them rolling over a team like the Bengals. This is an opportunity for them to do that again against another AFC opponent that, to your point, has looked like they're playing a little bit better, but it hasn't translated to the win column.
Yeah, that's my plus. AJ Brown has to be the plus factor in this game because, when I look at this matchup here, it's an identity for both offenses that are very similar. They both want to run the ball very well. And to me, that's a matchup that matters. Whoever runs the ball better, because both of these teams are at their best when they are running the ball well. Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, or, Tank Bigsby. And it looks like Travis Etienne. I get him confused now with Trevor Etienne playing well for Georgia. So now I'm getting confused here. It's going to be even more of a nightmare when they are both in the NFL.
When they're both in the league, yeah.
And I have to actually make sure that I pay attention more. So it looks like Travis Etienne's going to be back from the hamstring injury. Yeah. Both of these teams, for as much as we like to talk about the shot plays, the Brian Thomas Jr.'s, who I know he's going through injury as well. Christian Kirk's not in this game, but talk about the big shot plays for both of these teams. It comes from running the football. So whoever runs the football better is going to win this football game. I think that 100%. I really do. The plus factor is AJ Brown, because with the Eagles being a run the ball and then shot play kind of a team, there is nobody better in the NFL. Nobody, not one single receiver, in my opinion, that is better at living and dying by the shot play than AJ Brown is. I mean, when the Eagles are just back against the wall and they go, AJ, please save us with this 40-yard bomb. He goes, all right, fine.
Got it.
And they'll do it. And then, a couple of quarters later, they will go, nothing is working. AJ, please save us. And he goes, all right, fine. Got it. Cool. Next week, they'll do the same thing. They need because without that, we saw kind of the Eagles offense really struggle. Right. And the Jags have that player in Brian Thomas Jr., but he's a little banged up. And what's it going to be like when he's kind of the only option with Christian Kirk not there? It kind of looks like he's going to be one of those only options to be able to go deep down the field. So that's sort of a storyline that we want to pay attention to. But to me, the matchup that matters, whoever runs the football more, the X factor is AJ Brown. Because when it comes to very similar identities, ain't nobody better in the NFL at executing that sort of a passing attack and that sort of a passing game plan than AJ, who has a 97.3 PFF grade. win in single coverage. Pretty crazy. But your plus factor here. What do you
Yeah,
got?
we kind of flip-flop because in the way that I talked about just kind of the passing attack in Philadelphia in general, and you talked about the rushing game in general, now I'm going to go to Tank Bigsby when it comes to the Jaguars plus factor because the top three receivers for the Jags are injured. You said Christian Kirk is on IR. Last I saw, BTJ isn't going to be in this game. So then that leaves
I
Gabe
saw that
Davis.
he was pretty banged up. There was maybe you saw something more recently than me. They've been very ambiguous about this. It's like, oh, he's
Yes.
going to miss some time, and he's like, nah, he's day to day. He's not bad. So I'm not. If they don't have Brian Thomas Jr., that's even more of a you better run the football well in this one.
Yeah. And then you also have Gabe Davis fighting through an injury as day to day. So there's really no choice for this Jaguars offense but to run the football. And I think Tank Bigsby, even if you get Travis Etienne back, you're going to want to kind of run him a little bit more than the guy that's coming back from injury. And what that workload is going to look like, I think, is really still going to fall on Tank Bigsby's shoulders. So how effective can he be behind, again, this Jaguars offensive line? And how is that going to work when Philadelphia is going to kind of be able to key in on this? Philadelphia, who has a phenomenal defensive front too, when they can key in on the fact that you're going to want to run the ball, given that you don't have a ton of receiving options at this point, what's going to happen? I think between Tank Bigsby and Evan Ingram, these are going to be really, really big contributors to what Jacksonville is going to have to rely on against this Philadelphia Eagles team. But you're right. I mean, I don't necessarily see a path for the Jags taking this one or being able to keep pace with the Philadelphia Eagles now, who are firing on all cylinders offensively.
Dougie P returned to Philly as well. So obviously
Yeah,
a little bit
yeah.
emotional here. Is he going to have some sort of a trick play up his sleeve to really try to best his old team? I don't know. We'll see. We will see. Bears at Cardinals, the next 4 p.m. game that we're talking about here. Bears played well in the fourth quarter. I feel like we probably should have won it against Washington. That would have been a huge win for them, big momentum win.
Yes.
Cardinals coming off of a big momentum win themselves with a last-second field goal to win against the Miami Dolphins. A couple of different storylines here in this one. Carmen, for a matchup that matters, what do you got?
It's the Chicago offensive line and their health, really, against this Arizona defensive line. Because honestly, this Bears offensive line, even with, Braxton Jones goes down against the Commanders, that drastically shifts how they're able to do things. And then you have Tevin Jenkins in and out of the lineup. You have Doug Kramer having to come in relief after he had that failed goal line attempt. It was just a whole mess up front for the Chicago Bears offense. And despite the fact that this offensive line, 10th best run blocking grade in the league, tied for the 10th best pass blocking grade in the league, according to PFF. And then you've got this 27.7 pressure percentage allowed, which I think is the key here. That ranks 20th. You have an 82.9% pass block efficiency grade, which is 24th. That's kind of where it manifests itself, where you see that Caleb Williams doesn't have a lot of time to do things, and that it was especially evident after Braxton Jones went out in this last game, and they just kind of had to shuffle that offensive line around. But to the credit of Caleb Williams, to the credit of the Chicago Bears offense, they hung in there, and to a credit of the defense for keeping them in it, for stopping Washington in the red zone. They were only down by a score pretty late after that first score by Caleb Williams late in the game. You get those two scoring drives late. You pull ahead finally after not leading the entire game. That to me shows an incredible amount of resilience from Caleb Williams in particular, and not giving up on things even when there was absolutely no rhythm to be had. But you can't do that again. And I mean, honestly, leaving a team with 25 seconds needing a touchdown to go the length of the field usually means that you win the game. Again, I caution Washington against living like that because that was very dangerous, and a lot of things had to go wrong on the Bears' part and a lot of things had to go right on the Washington part for that to work out. But you never want to be in a case where you have to rely on your defense to stifle an offense to allow you to catch up late in the game. That's not a way to live either if you're the Chicago Bears. So trying to get out to a faster start against an Arizona defensive line that could allow you to do that, I should say. And this is a tremendous bounce back game for the Chicago Bears, who just lost in heartbreaking fashion. This is one of those things too, just anecdotally, can either kind of snowball and tank your season, or it can strengthen you as a team, getting through something like that and bouncing back. So this is going to be extraordinarily important for them on the road too, which I saw a stat on Twitter as well, where Matt Eberflus has not won a true road game for the Chicago Bears. He's like 0-17 or something like. I need to go back and look at that stat because that doesn't sound right to me. But they don't fare well on the road is the point in all of that.
That would be nuts if that was the case.
Wait, hold on. I'm going to look it up right now. So if you want to,
okay, all right. I'll take over for my matchup that matters, and then we'll come back.
Oh, on a Sunday, that was the qualifier. Has not won a true road game on a Sunday, but still, that's when the majority of games are played. So
that's still bad. That's still not good.
0-17. Yeah, no, not great.
Not great. My matchup that matters here, I'm going to give some kudos to Trey McBride, who's one of the best tight ends in the NFL, and I don't think that he gets enough love for being one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Over the last 3 weeks, Trey McBride, 82.6 receiving grade, 271 receiving yards, and a 23.1 threat percentage, which is a PFF stat that we have that you guys can see if you have a PFF Plus subscription, where it basically tracks how often are you getting targeted per route that you are running. So it's one way that we really keep tabs on, okay, how much are you emphasizing the offense? Everybody wants to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. and the great game that he had last week and how much he was a hero. Over the last 3 weeks, Trey McBride is targeted more than Marvin Harrison Jr. And so, again, I just don't think he gets the recognition that he deserves here. Now, when it comes to the Bears, they're pretty good at defending tight ends. They're 6th best in the NFL with only 45 receptions to tight ends allowed. They're 9th best in the NFL with just 566 receiving yards allowed to tight ends so far this season. So a top 10 group at defending the tight end position, but they've got a good one that they're going up against. And so can the Bears still be good at making sure that those tight ends stay quiet, particularly a great one like Trey McBride? That is my matchup that matters there. My plus factor is really just Caleb Williams. Can Caleb Williams just really get out to a hot start? Because he has not been able to do so most of the time throughout this season. He's got a 52.9 passing grade in the first quarter throughout this year. Last week alone, 38.3 passing grade in the first quarter. And so again, this is a road game, just like last week was a road game. You got to be able to get out of the gate a lot hotter than what Williams has been this season, certainly as of late when you look at last week. Fourth quarter, he was great. Now, if he's going to like take that fourth quarter that he had against the Commanders, and that's basically where he's going to start with the first, right? That's good. If we're rolling it over here, that's great. But I'm saying that we got to see a little bit more of a fire in him and some good production in the first quarter because we have not seen it so far this season. What's your plus factor here?
Yeah, it's incredibly kind of confounding that, especially those first 10 to 15 plays are usually scripted. And we've had some back and forth on terminology on whether or not Shane Waldron actually scripts or he just kind of has a plan. But like that's very common and that's pretty standard, I should say, actually, for every offense. And it hasn't worked for the Bears at all this season. I don't believe they have a touchdown on their first drive this year. But my plus factor here, again, is more outside of the stats, but it's Tyreek Stevenson, who's having the worst week ever, but deservedly so. I mean, this is a guy that had his back to the play on the Hail Mary for a good 5 seconds while the play was going on, and then he comes in late and disregards his assignment. He was supposed to be the one in the back of the scrum, playing the savior role or whatever you want to call it, and batting the ball out of Noah Brown's hands, who was the one that ultimately ended up catching the deflection that Tyreek Stevenson had on the ball. He tipped it up instead of batting it down because he was late to the play. He was trying to play hero. It was a whole mess. Matt Eberflus has not committed to Tyreek Stevenson starting this game, but the reality of the situation is that Tyreek Stevenson is needed on this Bears defense. He has been a good player for them, save for the boneheaded mistakes like the Hail Mary. And then also earlier in the game, he had a personal foul where he punched Sam Cosmi's face mask. And I'm like, bro, Sam Cosmi has 100 pounds on you. I don't know that that's the fight you want to pick.
Yeah, not smart. Not smart to punch the face mask and not smart to punch a guy who outweighs you by
a guard. Like, why are we picking fights with guards?
Yeah.
I just need to see him bounce back. I need to see him lock in. I need to see the fact that all of the conversations that we were not privy to that happened in the Bears locker room, in the meeting rooms, by Matt Eberflus, by his veteran teammates I need to see all of those things where the Bears are saying they hold each other accountable internally. All right, I need to see the fruits of that then on the field, and I want to see Tyreek Stevenson locked in if he does indeed play for the Chicago Bears this week. And I want to see him make some big plays and make the things that we know that he's capable of and kind of keep himself in check. Because the Bears were not very, Bears players especially were not very, they were pretty loud about the fact that they need to hold each other accountable. And I think Cole Kmet was the one that said, respect the game. And that's true.
Yeah. Lions Packers, big one. So big one that we have here. This was exciting. I'm glad this one is an afternoon slate just because a lot of people get to pay attention to it. Huge game here. Jordan Love said it is realistic that he could play this Sunday. I really hope that he is able to go and he feels as close to 100% as possible because, man, what a matchup this is. A divisional matchup, a potential future playoff matchup. You know, these are two teams that have Super Bowl aspirations with the way that they have been playing so far this season. Your matchup that matters. You gave a great reaction when I said Lions Packers. So tell me, what is your matchup that matters here in this game that it feels like there's a lot of them?
There's so many, and these teams obviously are very familiar with each other. There's a ton of different kind of pieces you can pick out. So I had a tough time kind of figuring out where I wanted to go with this one. But I do think that it comes down to the Detroit secondary and Green Bay's receiving options. What makes Green Bay so incredibly dangerous as an offense is Jordan Love is a good quarterback. No matter what the Twitter armchair, whatever GMs will tell you, he's just like, he's got Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers just like on either shoulder, like acting just like, yeah, do this, no, do this. Like
I think it's not an either or at this point. Like I think he's just the best version of. I'm not saying that he's like better than Aaron Rodgers, but there's not a quarterback, in my opinion, who's playing more confidently than Jordan Love. Maybe Justin Herbert as of late because of the last two games that we've seen, but Jordan Love's just been phenomenal this entire season.
I keep using the word with Jordan Love, the audacity of the way this man throws the football.
100%, yes.
It's just, he's unafraid to do anything. And you get just these mind-boggling tight windows that he'll throw into and he'll connect on, the Tucker Kraft touchdown in the back of the end zone there. But then, kind of the flip side of that coin is there are going to be times where he's going to take that chance and it's not going to pay off and he is going to throw an interception. But he is extraordinarily confident. He knows his receiving options so incredibly well. And again, Green Bay has so many of them when you take into account the tight ends, you got running backs, and then you've got all of these receivers who none are like, the elite wide receiver one, but that's by design. It's that you've got good to great receivers all over the field that defenses can only account for so many guys. And Green Bay most likely will have one more than you can account for on the field that Jordan Love will be able to get the ball to, because again, he's unafraid to make those throws. And then you look at the Detroit secondary where the safeties are really carrying this for them. It's not necessarily the corners. So I do think that there's an opportunity to attack Detroit's secondary on the outside in particular, because if you go on the inside, you have Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, who are two of the top three highest graded safeties in coverage in the league. Kirby Joseph leading the league, in fact, in coverage grade, allowing the second lowest completion percentage among safeties as well. Overall, Detroit has the third best coverage grade because of these two players. They are ball hawks. They will get in your face. Kirby Joseph is one of the funniest follows on Twitter. It's all vibes and it's all really good for this Detroit secondary, but they're going to have a lot of guys to contend with. But that's where these safeties do come in, is then you're going to have to kind of run these quarters coverages. You're going to have to run certain things where you're going to have to account for multiple zones with your safeties, but the Lions happen to have two of the best coverage safeties that you could possibly ask for. So
yeah, I mean, that's really I'll run that right into my plus factor. It's just the safeties overall. When you look at the Lions and the Packers, they are the two highest graded safety rooms in the NFL.
Yeah.
So these
Xavier McKinney is the second highest grade.
Right. It's Xavier McKinney, but then Evan Williams as well, how he is playing. The Lions have 9 interceptions from their safety room. The Packers have 7. So they're 1 and 2 in total coverage grade for the safety room. They are 1 and 2 in total takeaways from the safety room. Yeah. I mean, these are two teams that have elite back ends of their defense in coverage, which I think are the plus factor is certainly like, okay, which one of these groups is going to make the biggest impact? Is one of them going to have one more turnover than the other? Like that could really make the difference for defenses that have really relied on these safety rooms to, I don't want to say necessarily carry them, but just be an emphasis of what they do. And so that to me is a big time plus factor. Two of the best safety rooms in the NFL getting to go up, not against against each other, but try to one up the other when they are on those sides of the field. I think the matchup that matters is really the Packers run game versus the Lions defensive front, and really just how they have defended the run, because the Lions 713 yards allowed this year on the ground. That's fourth fewest. And then 23 rushes of 10 or more yards allowed. That is the 10th fewest. So this is a top 10, if not top 5 run defense unit for the Detroit Lions. And they're going up against a team that, you know, whether Jordan Love has been in the lineup or not, they have been able to run the ball really well. And I said this in the grades release show that we did earlier this week on Monday. My favorite part about the Packers offense is the fact that whatever they need from their run game, they are able to conjure it really at any time. Whatever that ratio is, hey, we need about 30% of the offense to really be based around the rushing attack. Josh Jacobs and the rest of the group just goes, okay, all right, 30%. We're going to be the 30%. If they need them to be 60% of the game plan and they need them to carry the offense, he goes, okay, yeah, let's do it. Give me the workload. And so to me, I just love how efficient because sometimes you get run games where, okay, yeah, they have all these like volume statistics like carries and touchdowns and yards, but the efficiency might be down. So if you really curb their volume, their impact on the game isn't nearly as much. That doesn't feel like it's the case with the Packers. The Packers feel like they're efficient whether they are carrying the game plan or whether they are supplementary to the passing game. So that to me, can that still be a mainstay? Whatever version of Jordan Love they are getting in this game, whether it's a 80%, a 90%, a 70%, or a 0 if he doesn't play in this game, I think they have the run game to be able to get what they need out of this offense to make it very, very interesting here. And Dave Sofaro once again just hit me up and he said this is the first game that the Lions are playing outside of a dome this season. Obviously, it being in Green Bay is a really big deal. So I think I'm just really excited about that part of the matchup here. What's your plus factor before we move on?
Yeah, it's so interesting that my faith doesn't go down in the Packers because if Jordan Love plays or not, which is just, I think they're one of the only teams that I could, probably the only team I could say that for, where if their starting quarterback, who's one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, goes down, that somehow I'm still fine with it, and that I have faith in what Matt LaFleur is able to do when Malik Willis is on the field, and the way that he's, again, we saw this last game, in game, be able to switch into the packages and the different things that he has for Malik Willis versus what the game plan was with Jordan Love. It's just incredible, and Matt LaFleur has to be a Coach of the Year candidate because of it, but it's not actually my plus factor. My plus factor is a fun one because Ben Johnson is an insane man. And I think it's going to be Sam Laporta because of Ben Johnson's blood feuds with literally every team they play. He finds something to hone in on that the other team he's playing does well and then does it better than them. And that's what so I think Sam Laporta is it, because if you look at Matt LaFleur's kind of track record, he uses his tight ends a lot, and Luke Musgrave is out right now for the Packers, but you've seen kind of the heroics of Tucker Kraft, and I think that Ben Johnson is going to say, yeah, I got one of those too. And then Sam Laporta, you're kind of waiting for him to break out a little bit more, and you saw him get a little bit more usage in this last game. Just putting up 52 points is just absolutely insane. And if you're wondering what the last blood feud was, it was going against the Titans, who have had quarterback troubles. Ben Johnson decided that they didn't need their quarterback to win that game. And that was like big Jared Goff had a total of, I believe, 15 pass attempts or 18 pass attempts, something like that. Didn't even get going till later in the game. Like they willingly tied one hand behind Jared Goff's back and was like, "Now we can still beat you." So I think Ben Johnson is an absolute madman, which is meant as it is an extraordinary compliment. And I do think that he is going to challenge the Green Bay Packers and say, "Hey, I got a tight end too that can do a lot of stuff. Here's Sam Laporta, ladies and gentlemen."
I do love that call out. I love it because obviously they're just it's tensions so high with these two teams who believe that they are two of the best in the NFL, and I think we're going to get the best version of them. Certainly,
I wish every game.
I hope Jordan Love is as healthy as possible here because this is a beautiful matchup. Rams Seahawks, another divisional matchup that we have here. Traveling to Seattle for this one. My matchup that matters, I'm going to go with the Seattle Seahawks offensive line versus the Rams defensive line.
Cool.
Seattle has given up the most pressures in the NFL so far this year, and I really like this Rams defensive line. We've talked about Jared Verse and how fantastic he has been so far this season with a ton of pressures just for a rookie. Braden Fisk, okay, the pass rush win percentage is a little bit lower, but he's still racking up the pressures as well. He's still getting home. Byron Young, we've seen him be able to do that. Kobe Turner, Bobby Brown's good as a run defender in the middle, and so this Rams defensive line, I think we've talked about it quite a bit on this show. I don't know if they're getting enough national love as they probably deserve because of how young of a group they are, but they're going up against a Seattle Seahawks offensive line that has been pretty susceptible to giving up pressures throughout the entire season. And I don't know if that gets better this week. And again, I think that we're going to talk about, the quarterback matchups and things like that. And obviously those are important things to talk about. But to me, this is a not talked about as much part of this matchup that I think is going to mean a lot. It is such a weakness of the Seahawks. And I don't think people realize just how much the Seahawks offensive line has struggled,
right,
and how tough that might look for them this weekend against a young defensive line that really looks to get after it every single week. So that is my matchup that matters there. What about you, Carmen?
Yeah, well, and plus Geno Smith is being extraordinarily productive, and you just wonder how in the world he's doing that behind a line that really isn't doing much to help him out. But I'm going to the other side of things, and it's Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua against the Seattle secondary. We saw what happened when both of these guys returned to the lineup, much to both Trevor and I's chagrin, and seeing just exactly how much that mattered. And then you've got really good corners, I think, in Devin Witherspoon and Riq Woolen for Seattle. And I really am looking forward to this matchup more than anything. I don't know that I have any of these guys like having the edge, or the obvious edge, I should say. But Riq Woolen allowed just 65 yards in coverage this season. Devin Witherspoon allowed 271. This is a stingy secondary, and how is that going to kind of match up between these two players? And I just think that's going to be really interesting.
It looks like Metcalf's gonna be able to go in this game.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't sure about it. It's early right now. It's Wednesday. I didn't know if I wanted to like commit to him being a plus factor, but
I think he has to be, right?
Yeah,
because
for sure.
he's not practicing on Wednesday. Mike McDonald said that they're optimistic that he's able to practice tomorrow when he's dealing with a knee injury. But you saw what Seattle's offense was without him. They really rely on him to be a one-on-one winner in single coverage and contested catch situations. He leads the team right now in catches of 15 or more yards, and that is what Geno Smith wants to do. And not having that player out there, it felt like they did not have the main foundational piece of their passing offense against the Falcons, or against the Buffalo Bills last week. It certainly was against the Falcons when they played really well in that game. But he has to be the plus factor, because if they go out and they have the same sort of offensive struggles that they did against the Buffalo Bills without DK Metcalf, the Rams will beat them. We've seen the Rams play well at times this season when we didn't think that there was any reason for them to, and now they're more healthy. Now there is reason to believe that the Rams are going to play well. So you look at Metcalf and just how much of a big-time winner with almost an elite PFF receiving grade in single coverage. I mean, you talk about a guy who puts it up there for his receivers to go up and win it. I mean, Geno Smith, that's his entire style of football. And without DK Metcalf out there on the field, it looks like a completely different offense. So if they don't have him, I think they're in trouble. But what about you? What's your plus factor for you?
It's Jared Verse for the Rams, given the fact that, I mean, he is just having one hell of a rookie season, 21.6% pressure rate. And that's the highest of any edge playing right now. Aiden Hutchinson had a higher one, but, he got hurt. And now a rookie has taken the spot of that. 21% pass rush win rate too, which ranks fourth among qualified edges, and that's guys that have at least 100 snaps. He's obviously the first among rookies in that stat, and then he's the Rams' highest graded edge, obviously, so 77, which ranks 19th among all edges as well. So he's just having an incredible season, and he's becoming a game wrecker for this Rams defensive line that we were really concerned about, obviously, with Aaron Donald going out. And you've got some other guys along that, especially on the defensive interior too, that are helping things out and getting Jared Verse kind of those one-on-one and favorable matchups. But they've done a really, really good job. And no one obviously is going to replace Aaron Donald. But they've done a really good job at maintaining production, even with losing a player like that. And I think that that deserves a ton of commendation from the Rams coaching staff and just in general. But Jared Verse just killing it for the rookies.
They
Defensive player
are,
of the year candidate or
you
defensive
know,
rookie of the year candidate.
yeah, no, I mean, defensive rookie of the year front runner. I mean, you could talk about him as defensive player of the year. Maybe if he would just stop missing so many tackles, maybe he could continue to rack up those sacks in the backfield. But, I don't want to take anything away from him. He's having a phenomenal year. But Jared, come on, the missed tackles got to stop.
Right.
You could have a historic rookie year here for the second half of this one if you're not missing as many tackles as you did in the first. But, we're going to stay positive here. We're going to talk about how good he was playing. And I agree with you. I think the Rams defensive line is a big time X factor for this one. Obviously, I had them as my matchup that matters here. Cherry Bundy, this podcast is sponsored by them. They're fantastic. They are the performance drink that is fueling the health lead revolution. I got to try some of their products a couple weeks ago, and oh, man, they're fantastic. I mean, if you are living an active lifestyle at all whatsoever, if you are somebody who's into weightlifting or CrossFit or even just walking around the neighborhood a couple of times, this was fantastic stuff for you because it's got natural anti-inflammatories, no added sugars, highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the world, the tart cherries that they use for this product. It can help reduce soreness. It can help increase recovery, support immunity, helps improve sleep, all sorts of stuff. And not just the recovery drink, that they have a special like sleep gummies that you could get. They have like a sleep drink that is perfect for helping people with sleep. It's such a great thing for anybody that is living any sort of an active lifestyle whatsoever. It is used by nearly 500 collegiate professional sports teams, 10 of the last Super Bowl champions. Every single team that has played overseas this year in the NFL has had Cherry Bunny with them to help them play their best and recover. So whatever you are doing, if it's active at all whatsoever, check them out. Products are available at Amazon, cherrybunny.com, retailers nationwide, like Publix, Kroger, things like that. So check local. But if you cannot find it, they've got all sorts of great products. You can go see all of them over at cherrybunny.com. I love it. I think you guys will too. Sunday Night Football. This one just got a lot more interesting, didn't it?
Sure did.
Anthony Richardson, no longer the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. They're traveling to the Minnesota Vikings, who have dropped 2 in a row now. And I think they're certainly fiending for a win here. And they're going to have Joe Flacco as the quarterback on the other side, who's going to try to get in the way of that. Matchup that matters here, Carmen. What do you got?
It's, again, going to be how this Colts offensive line, which is a great unit, by the way, 64 pressures allowed in pass protection. That's the 3rd fewest. 45 quarterback hurries allowed in pass protection. That's the 6th fewest. 84.2 PFF grade. That's 1st in the league. Pass blocking grade 1st. Run blocking grade 1st. This is a great unit.
Yeah.
How do they match up with what Brian Flores likes to do on defense, which is confuse the hell out of these guys? And we've seen it the last 2 weeks, where you've seen quarterbacks be able to kind of dissect what they're looking at, who's coming, how much protection they need. Jared Goff was phenomenal at that against the Vikings. And it was just, you need, I feel like, a lot of experience to be able to kind of dissect what this Vikings defense is going to do, because there aren't obvious tells. I don't know if the Lions figured out what those tells possibly could be, but we're going to see. I am very interested to see how then Joe Flacco does as a result of that. But I do think a lot of this comes down to the offensive line picking up certain stunts, figuring out where the pressure is coming from, identifying and setting the protections to the right person. Because I think teams have gotten tripped up by setting their protection to a guy like Andrew Van Ginkel, for instance, who is kind of a Swiss Army knife in Brian Flores' defense. And they move him all around. He has all different kinds of assignments, from dropping into coverage to blitzing to just, following running backs, spying quarterbacks. He's got so much stuff. So you can't really rely on setting your protection to a guy like that. And is the line or whoever's in charge of those protection calls going to know that? So I'm really interested to see how that ends up working out against, again, one of the best offensive lines in football.
Yeah, I think that you're totally right there. I mean, Joe Flacco is a totally different style of quarterback than Anthony Richardson, but like Flacco, 52.6, great under pressure. And you hope that offensive line for the Colts is able to stand up to their reputation here against a really good front and a really good defense coordinator in Brian Flores. Because if they're not, it's not like Joe Flacco has really handled pressure better than Anthony Richardson. His passing grade under pressure is barely above it. So maybe he throws hot a little bit better. Like maybe he gets to his receivers a little bit better, a little bit quicker. Maybe you're attacking short and intermediate, since Anthony Richardson's average depth of target was so much further deep down the field. Maybe you want to be a little bit more honed in on what you could do in the short passing game. But I think it all comes down to really how well this offensive line is going to stand up. I also think it's been a little bit quiet for the receivers not named Justin Jefferson over the last couple of weeks. I feel like the receivers were really able to hit the ground running when the season kind of opened up, and Minnesota was able to surprise some teams. It's like, okay, we got better receivers outside of Jefferson than you think we do. I think it's been a little bit more quiet lately. They're going up against a Colts secondary that has been good at times, but quite up and down. Just been very natural to the position. I think Jalen Jones has played well at times, struggled at times. Sam Womack has played well at times, struggled at times. He's gone through injury. Kenny Moore's kind of the same way. The secondary, the deep safeties is sort of the same way. So which version of the Colts secondary are we going to get this week? But I do feel like we're going to get a really good version of the Vikings pass catchers. And so they kind of got to be on their P's and Q's. That's a matchup that I'm watching as well. I think the offensive line, defensive line, the Colts and Vikings, the Colts offensive line, Vikings defensive line is the main matchup that matters. Yeah. But I do want to shout out Minnesota's wide receivers versus the Colts secondary. I think that's a big one too. My plus factor though, Michael Pittman Jr. If there's anybody that might be happy about Anthony Richardson getting benched, it feels like it would be Michael Pittman Jr. Because when you look at just the last 3 weeks, 14.8% threat percentage is lowest on the team despite having the most receiving snaps on the team. Like Richardson was just not finding him. And he really was not targeting him. And I don't know if it's just because teams are really keying in on Michael Pittman Jr., but he runs the most receiving snaps of any player on the team. And yet he was seeing a lot less targets than he regularly does, normally in that 20% threat percentage rate. And so much less from Michael Pittman Jr. Do we get to see him be a little bit more involved with Richardson now benched and Joe Flacco out there? That's something I'm very curious to see because Josh Downs has been playing well. A.D. Mitchell has, Alec Pierce has, but Pittman has not been a consistent part of this passing game, and maybe he will be now that there has been a quarterback change. What about you? What do you think? What's the plus factor here?
Yeah, I'm going to go with TJ Hawkinson because it sounds like he's going to be coming back.
I think he's going to play.
There was some hope that maybe he was going to play last week against the Rams, but the short week and all that other stuff just didn't really quite work out. But he is on the active roster now, and all signs are pointing to TJ Hawkinson making his debut then in this game. And you were talking about how teams have maybe figured out a little bit of Minnesota's passing options, but now you're going to add the dynamic of TJ Hawkinson into this mix. And I think that teams are a little bit more, I mean, I do not want to speak ill of Johnny Munt. Please believe. Love that guy. He's a cult hero in Minnesota.
All due respect, of course.
All due respect to Johnny Munt. Teams are going to play TJ Hawkinson a little bit differently, and that should take some of the attention. That's why he worked so well in tandem with a guy like Justin Jefferson because as a tight end, he was able to take some of the attention off of Justin Jefferson, and then that opened up things for guys like Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, all that other stuff. I fully expect that to happen again. And they have a more formidable rushing attack offensively as well with Aaron Jones now in Minnesota. So this all of a sudden really looks like an absolutely complete offense. And you look at how much Sam Darnold has really internalized the scheme, how much Kevin O'Connell sets him up for success, and how good of a coach and play caller Kevin O'Connell is. I fully expect TJ Hawkinson to mean a lot for this Minnesota offense. And as experienced as Joe Flacco is, I just also don't really see him being able to figure out this Minnesota defense in the way that Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford were the last couple of weeks because it is still a really tall task. So you're going to be able to limit points there. And I do think that we know this Minnesota offense is capable of scoring points. And TJ Hawkinson is going to be a huge boost in that.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveling to the Kansas City Chiefs for the Monday Night Football matchup this week. Buccaneers coming off of a tough loss against the Falcons. I think that's appropriate for me to be able to say that, even with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans not in the game. They felt like they could have won that one at home, certainly, and they unfortunately came up short. 2 out of the last 3 weeks? Or was it 3 of the last 4 weeks they lost the Atlanta Falcons? Not great, not ideal. Now they're going up against a team that is undefeated. You mentioned a little Super Bowl rematch here. Teams that know each other well, certainly from when Tom Brady was the quarterback, now Baker Mayfield out there for the Buccaneers. What's the matchup that matters here for you, Carmen?
I can't go anywhere else but the Bucs O-line and the Chiefs D-line because Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, they kind of grab a lot of the headlines, but I think the story of this season for the Kansas City Chiefs is this defense under Steve Spagnuolo, and then more specifically, Chiefs defensive line, pass rushing, fourth ranked pass rushing grade, 81.1, 74.4 PFF grade overall. You've got Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, just 5 pressures behind Chris Jones. He's got 28 on the season, and they added Josh Uche. So I like this is a team that is not just standing pat either, and that's why the Kansas City Chiefs are the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's just another person you're going to have to game plan for if you're the Tampa Bay offense. And this offensive line, they've been a good unit this year, honestly. Like they've been very solid, I believe, like top 10, top 15 grades across the board for this Tampa Bay offensive line. But this is going to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, tests of their season.
I think the matchup that matters for me is the Chiefs tight ends and just middle of the field passing attack against the Buccaneers linebackers specifically, because over the last 4 weeks, which is really since Servassier Dennis went down for the season, they have a 29.7 coverage grade from their linebackers, including Levante David, and that is worst in the NFL. So Travis Kelce is coming off of his best game of the season, where he was able to get in the end zone for the first time, what we saw against them take on the Las Vegas Raiders last week in the win. And this is a team that just really knows how to attack defense's weaknesses. And unfortunately for the Bucs, they have a glaring one over the middle of the field when you make their linebackers cover. And without Dennis, it's just proving to be a big time weak link in the middle. And I think that's causing some chemistry issues as well with the rest of the defense, even with the 2 experienced safeties behind him. It's been really tough for them to cover players over the middle, specifically the tight end position. And so with such a bad coverage grade, if the floor of how these linebackers cover does not get higher in this game, it's just, I feel like, going to go as expected. And the Chiefs are going to continue to be undefeated, and they're going to win at home. So the linebackers have to cover much, much better in this game for Tampa. They cannot be this much of a weak link. But your plus factor in this game, what do we got?
It's honestly a bright spot of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, which outside of Baker Mayfield, who has been overall really, really, really good this season. But what's really been interesting in the absence of Chris Godwin and Mike Evans now is that even more than it had started before that, but this offensive rushing attack, that is not something we've been able to see in Tampa Bay in a long time. And you've got kind of this 3-headed monster, 5.06 yards per play average on the ground between the 3 of them. That ranks 6th in the league. Look at God, Trev. Look at God when it comes to the Buccaneers having a true dynamic rushing attack.
You used to pray for times like this.
I used to pray for times like this, legitimately, Trev. And it's so good to see. And it's so unfortunate that it comes when it's really the Bucs now only option. I mean, you have Jalen McMillan and you have Trey Palmer that Baker Mayfield is going to have to get up to speed with, and he is a little bit, but leaning on this rushing attack, I actually feel good about it. But that's going to be the plus factor, and it's going to be how effective they are. And if they can kind of rotate those guys in and out, you're seeing Rachaad White kind of finally turn into that dual threat guy, because he's got 256 rushing yards, which is second on the team, but then he also has 3 receiving touchdowns. So this is something that he's a threat in both aspects of the offense, and between him and Bucky Irving, and then you've got Sean Tucker coming in certain packages and downs. I really, really enjoy watching the ground game in Tampa now, and I hope that that'll be enough to kind of keep this offense kind of well-rounded again, and give the Chiefs some questions that they're going to have to answer, because that defense is no joke.
I'm really excited to see what Josh Uche can be in this defense, particularly because he's not their type of edge rusher. They don't really have an edge rusher on the team less than 250, 255 pounds, and Uche's coming in, sub 240. So it's just a different type of player for them. How Steve Spagnuolo is going to utilize that speed rusher element for him. And 2 out of the last 3 years, he's had a 19 plus pass rush win percentage, including this year. So I think that Uche and just his place in this offense is going to mean a lot. He's not my plus factor that I ended up choosing, but I wanted to make sure that I gave that a shout out. I think that certainly DeAndre Hopkins being on this team as well, I think is going to be a big deal, as it continues to be throughout the remainder of this season. But the plus factor has to be Baker Mayfield. When you look at Mayfield, 5 games of 3+ passing touchdowns, it's the most in the NFL. 4 games of 300 yards passing, that's the most in the NFL. PFF passing grade, he's 13th. Red zone passing touchdowns, he's 2nd. Now, of course, a lot of that is with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans in the building, but that just goes to show you how good of a year Baker Mayfield was having before those guys went down. And so to me, he is the ultimate X factor here, because if Mayfield continues to keep his foot on the gas and the chemistry with him and offensive coordinator Liam Cohen is still strong, this is not going to be a Bucs offense that you could just write off every single week, including in the passing game. So very curious to see what it looks like here on the road against a really good defense. And can Mayfield go toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes? And we will have to see how that matchup manifests. But I think Baker Mayfield is the ultimate plus factor here in this game. You can see all the plus factors throughout the rest of the league as well on your own team specifically. When you have a PFF Plus subscription, you go to pff.com. You can check out all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show and so much more. You can keep up with PFF grades live with the in-game grading on Sundays when a lot of stuff is going on. If you have a PFF Plus subscription, you can see the early grades as they are rolling in. Afterwards, of course, you could see the finalized grades, the data points. It'll basically allow you to understand your team better than you ever have before. And whether that's just for your own fan purposes, fantasy football purposes, betting purposes, whatever it is, PFF Plus subscription is going to help you out. Appreciate everybody watching and listening to this podcast a day early now on Wednesday with the schedule here, trying to get the preview out early here for you guys. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Carmen Vitali. Happy Halloween, even from somebody who does not enjoy it as much. I won't be too much of a Scrooge here with it.
Wait, Trev, what is your favorite candy then? If you can't get into the costume aspect of it, can you get into the candy? That's the big question.
There's only one real answer.
Okay, what is it?
It's Reese's. Reese's.
Well, I'm allergic to peanut butter, so I can't have Reese's.
Okay, all right. Well, now I feel bad about it, but to me,
no, that's okay. I've heard it. I've heard it's wonderful. I've heard it's wonderful.
What is your favorite candy then? I'm very curious. I feel like I ask people and they say Reese's all the time, but what is your favorite?
Yeah, I know. Well, my favorite candy has changed because my favorite candy now didn't exist when I was a kid. It's the Nerds gummy clusters. Those are my favorites.
My fiance loves those. So
I know.
We've
talked about it.
There. Okay,
I tell you
already knew.
I have talked about it.
You already knew. Whatever kind of candy that you love the most for Halloween, however you celebrate it, happy Halloween. We appreciate all you guys for rocking with us throughout the season. We're going to have a great second half of the season as well. Enjoy week 9. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Carmen Vitali. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the PFF NFL show. We will see you guys same time next week. See you then.